views, thoughts, and opinions expressed are the speaker's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Phi Labs or the Archway Protocol. The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only.
Welcome back to the Arch-In Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Weisen, joined with co-hosts Valeria and Cosmos Joe, the inspiration behind the Joe chain. Cosmos Joe, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks so much. And I've been watching these. I really like the way you guys move through the topics.
Thank you so much, bro. Diving into it, let's start with some of the Atom props that are still live. Going back to Prop 93, we mentioned a little bit of negative connotation around it last week with not really liking that everything's open source. It is passing overwhelmingly. Again, this is the proposal for only funding open source projects and protocols on the Cosmos Hub, and it was proposed by Don Kryptonium. And ironically, even though this is largely supported by Gadikian, I actually interacted with him on Twitter a couple days ago about him wanting to more keep some of his thoughts and ideas and knowledge to himself so he can monetize it better. And I'm like, isn't that the idea of closed source products as well? And he didn't seem to think eye to eye. The idea behind this prop is that if things are closed source, there is inherent risk with user funds. But it's a really scary precedent that Juno, now Cosmos, and seemingly more will only fund projects that are fully open source. Not audits don't seem to matter. What are your guys' thoughts?
Yeah, no, I think it's a real shame that they'll only be funding open source protocols just because, smaller teams that really do have innovative ideas can come in, start, request funds, and then a bigger team can come over and maybe take over those ideas and stuff. I think it doesn't lead to healthy competition. I think things should be open source once they're out. But while people are building, people have a right to their IP and to get funding for it. So maybe in terms of like funding, it should be more maybe accountability with core development teams and not necessarily open source to the entire ecosystem from the very beginning.
And as far as someone like me, I'm the end user. I just want to use good protocols, right? And it would be a shame if, whether it be over open source or any other issue that maybe to the end user, we don't see when we're interacting with an application, if that's going to determine the quality of apps that we get to use on Juno. The good thing I have to say is not every chain needs to follow the same policies with funding. So over time, hopefully the better ideas win out. And I think that's a strength of the Cosmos ecosystem and the way that it's built. So maybe too early to tell, but it's going to be polarizing, I guess, for developers.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're definitely seeing different political leanings of different chains in the Cosmos ecosystem. It's just kind of strange to me that usually the hub's the one that's supposed to be non-political, non-partisan, not make kind of leaning or slanted decisions. But the idea would be that things that did want to stay closed source would have to pursue grants and whatnot instead, which is a great alternative, which I'd love to bring up for Prop 94, which is also passing overwhelmingly. And that is the fund for incentives for the interchain NFTs. We talked pretty positively about it last podcast, and then we delved a lot more into it. And it's just the proposal itself is really lacking on any enumeration for what's going to be done with the funds. It's written to be worded like, oh, this is an incentivized testnet. Everyone can go get involved. Like the users will try it and this atom will be redirected to the users. And that's simply not the case. It's not actually an open incentivized testnet. It's an incentivized testnet for themselves. So they're seemingly keeping the money. It's not actually determined at all. And then even then it's to build these gamified NFTs, but the Cosmos Hub itself doesn't have NFTs. So what chains are they going to be used on, and why are they getting funding here?
As far as Prop 94 goes, it's definitely not a public testnet. That was confirmed. You need to be skilled in command line interface, which is basically the devs, right? And they're going to set up these bounties that they can then hit to, I guess, different aspects of the testing from the community's viewpoint. And this is the problem I have with all the spend proposals, really. The way they're written, the community is not considered at all. This prop to a regular community member who's big on NFTs, I would love to be able to move my NFTs cross-chain. It looks like we're paying for the developers to just pay themselves, basically. And this tech can easily be tested in a different way. I think if this tech is so good, they should be able to monetize it and have it either paid for by the dev teams themselves and say, look, we've tested this. We put our investment of funds and time into make sure this test net went well. And going forward, it's going to be monetized, and then we'll get paid back, and then some value has to accrue to at least one of the tokens. Otherwise, this will be a repeated spend by the community for just a general upkeep. And who knows, maybe every time the different blockchains go through their upgrades, now this has to get tested again, right? So that part is unclear. I definitely think that there are better ways to fund these endeavors without just hitting the community funds. I definitely think so. Or at least have a partnership where they could raise some outside funding or pay for it themselves, and then a portion of it is paid for by the community, which I think is fair.
Yeah, I mean, this is a $250,000. This isn't something to laugh about. 20,000 Atom coming from the community pool, and it's not being forward thinking to the community. And we're seeing a lot of the dev teams which are building what we're using, so that's fantastic. But now they're raiding the community coffers when the funding that they're all getting is really coming from the community. They're the ones holding the price up, making this possible in the first place. And so it's I don't know. I don't have a problem with them getting funding from the community pool if it's enumerated and transparent. At least Prop 89 with Cosmic Validator, they're like, hey, this is to fund us building this. And then you can vote yes or no. But if this is just funding their team to do something that they really should be doing, that is good for the ecosystem, and they want to be paid $250,000 for it, then have that listed. Don't make it like kind of look like it's going to the community or being remunerated or getting community engagement and involvement when that's simply not the case.
Right. It's not clear what the community is getting. And there's also no definition for what constitutes a successful test. What if 20% of the NFTs are lost during this test net? Is that a success because 80% actually made it to the chain that where they're intended to go? I don't know. But I would like to be able to use the tech. I just think there has to be a better way to pay for these.
Up next, we have proposal 154 from Kujira to deploy a Kuji Luna fin market. So currently it's passing overwhelmingly. So what are you guys' thoughts on that?
Congratulations on Luna coming back. I've congratulated the Kujira team quite a bit for surviving the Terra Luna collapse. They're doing some things really right and being incredibly conservative in the fact that like they don't have token emissions going to validators. Like a lot of validators are running at a loss, and they're only taking the proceeds that they get from trading fees to then remunerate their validators and their stakers, which is, it's inefficient, but it's also really safe. It's not diluting their token. But then they go and they accept things like this as collateral, and that's dangerous. I've already voiced my concern about having Atom be the primary collateral for a stablecoin, and it's passing overwhelmingly. I get that the teams are still close, and they're building a bunch of brilliant stuff, but I'm scared. One thing that is cool about bringing up Kujira governance in general is, as we know, all the different app chains or chains on Cosmos have their own governance parameters, have their own sovereignty, and something about Kujira is they can only actually push live whitelisted contracts that have passed governance. So it's not something where you can just deploy your own contract and then like vote on parameters or whatnot. But literally you cannot push a contract live to the validator set unless it passes governance, which is why this does have to go, why they do have 154 governance proposals already, because every time you want to deploy new contracts, there you go. It also does put a lot of pressure on the validators, but potentially that's something that can really save them if something like Prop 16 from Juno, like if something like that gets pushed through, like there was a lot of real concern at the time, like, hey, like, are the validators, the people who push this through, going to be liable for like stealing money from somebody? Like, is this something that's going to come back on them with legal reciprocity? And now with gatekeeping, you understand that risk a lot better, in my opinion.
Speaking of Juno, Proposal 87 is up on the Juno network to fund a hack Juno in Turkey, a community spend proposal of around 20,000 Juno.
It's passing with quite a bit of support, and it seems like a good hack product. So let's get more developers into the ecosystem.
I think for any of the spends, as long as there's a clear outcome that is the aim of the spend, I think they're good. I know that I'm usually voting no on props, but it usually has more to do with how they're written and the level of transparency rather than the spend itself.
Yeah, and we got links to everything in the episode description, as well as the tweet thread if you found us through that. The proposal written for Prop 87 is written fantastically with measurable ROI and very well detailed. So congrats to that team. Seems like it's going to pass, and looking forward to seeing the results.
And then up next, we have Prop 120 from Kava. So they're proposing a software upgrade that will allow Kava to roll out new features such as community pool and inflation rate and additional improvements to the Kava EVM.
So part that I'm excited for is I love it when teams are building their own modules that can be worked up the chain back to be added pretty much to the Cosmos SDK. And they're rolling out an X-Kava Mint as a new module, which would make it easier for layer 1 chains to control their emissions in a way that's formulaic. You see, the generic Cosmos and then lots of chains from it, such as like Juno, will just have the token emissions go to the validators and then to the stakers through there. But then you see other chains such as like Osmosis, where it's like only like 25% is going to stakers, 14% going to LP, 25% going to the team, and it's more difficult to do these without the modularity that Kava Mint is going to bring. So I'm excited to see how well it works, and if it does work really well, I do expect this to get added to the Cosmos SDK. As with our tech paper that hasn't been released yet from Archway, we've got 2 modules that we think will be added all the way to Cosmos SDK decently soon, because they're just better additions to the Cosmos stack.
So speaking of software upgrades, the V12 upgrade for Juno is up on Commonwealth. It's being discussed currently. And a few of the additions that they're proposing is a contract fee split, where 50% of fees collected from contract usage will be split between contract developers, DeFi Oracle price feed, a token factory for DAOs and developers, setting minimum and maximum fees through governance, and a 20% initial governance deposit for new members joining the network as well.
Yeah, so the idea of Archway has really forced the hand of a lot of other layer 1s to start considering developers, especially as they're struggling to get solid applications built out on their networks. And so we're seeing more of this 50% gas fee split, and that's fantastic. Love to see it. Archway will be bringing much, much more than this, but it is a step in the right direction.
Yeah, when I spoke with Jake Hartnell last month, he said this is going to be just a huge deal for Juno. What's coming with the upgrade actually already exists on the Joe chain, and that's basically going to be used as a canary chain for some of these upgrades. And I think, I think the fee sharing is definitely a game changer. You want to incentivize people to deploy extremely useful and profitable smart contracts onto any chain.
Absolutely. It doesn't make sense for the developers to get left out at all. And so this is a stark upgrade. And what I do like about this proposal as well is they enumerate exactly what parameters will be governed by the DAO. And it's starting out the 50% fee. So it's going to start out half in the middle at 50%, but the stakers at any time could put up a proposal and like raise it to 75, lower it to 1, anywhere from 1 to 100. They can set the parameters. So it's not set in stone. They're going to learn by doing, which is the proper way to move forward. And I like that being enumerated, because we're not Kujira. Not everything has to go to governance. So we need to know what the DAO does control and what it doesn't. One thing that's really cool about Juno right now that is coming live, I've really enjoyed the red versus blue clash of DAOs, they're calling it. So they airdropped, if you're staking any Juno, go check your wallet. They airdropped a bunch of red and blue tokens, seemingly arbitrarily, to Juno holders to help raise awareness for their upcoming upgrades for, I believe, DAO's tooling. And just the idea of like, hey, like you guys are now a team, and it's make of it what you want to. Get social engagement, build things, but like you have these pre-built DAOs that nobody was really expecting, and that's fun to me.
Yeah, it looks like there are some missions involved where people have to work together and coordinate. I've been added to a bunch of group chats because of this. I'm Team Blue, and I don't know exactly what we're going to be doing, but it's definitely bringing people together, creating some excitement and some, I would say, positive community collaboration that's always appreciated in the bear market when everyone's angry at the token prices.
100%. It doesn't cost you money to participate. Everyone's added and involved. I really like this strategy. I'm sorry that Team Blue is currently getting destroyed on all metrics. Lowest claim rate, lowest development rate.
Yeah, red is winning. It's been claimed more, and it's had more built out so far. So,
but as soon as they get that Joe chain partnership with Team Blue, I think things are going to turn around.
That's what we need, and there will be derivatives of these tokens. We're just waiting for liquidity pools, so that's going to add a twist to this. I already have some of the derivatives. I can't say how I got them, but half of my blue tokens were traded for black tokens, and there will be purple, and I'm sure there'll be other colors. This is going to add an interesting twist. We just need a liquidity pool to really set it off.
Love it. Well, anyways, great job, DAO and Clash of DAOs. Very, very neat. So Informal Systems is forking to a new Tendermint core. Informal Systems has been maintaining the previous Tendermint core for quite some time, but they had a nice detailed tweet thread that we'll link here, explaining that it's difficult with Tendermint trademarked and them not technically owning Tendermint for them to continue all upgrades there. They will make the old Tendermint core in archive, but will migrate to the new ones, and they're in constant communication with other forks that are ongoing, such as Celestia and Say, and are hoping that they can keep upgrades that take place there push up the chain to them, so they can maintain it on this new fork, as well as whatever new modules and upgrades come out with theirs, they'll relay to them. So it's nice to know that those chats are ongoing. The more there are forks, the more fragmentation there gets, the more risk there is if one small oversight adds risk to a contract or whatnot, but they seem to be taking the proper steps right now. Informal Systems has been doing a wonderful job maintaining the Cosmos Hub.
Up next, we have the draft proposal on Osmosis about automating staking of LP rewards to set validator preferences. So the goal of this is to increase liquidity provider participation with governance. Thoughts?
It is definitely worded that is the goal of this. The goal of this is to have less Osmo be sold. Let's be real. And you can't blame them for it. The idea is like if you're LPing, say, Osmo and Atom, and you're earning Osmo, if you wanted to keep LPing, you'd like take half of the Osmo and sell it for Atom, and then you'd add it to the pool, or you can just sell the Osmo and actually claim the APR that you're suggesting to get. And by auto-staking it, now there's like less Osmo that's liquid and ready to be sold. So that is the actual purpose of this. I think it's overstepping a little bit, and they've gotten quite a bit of feedback suggesting the same. But if your primary focus is the price of Osmo, this does make it more difficult to sell.
Right. I think a lot of DEXs have trouble just aligning the priorities, because the governance token is not necessarily held by the same people who are voting. The LPers, right? The LPers are the ones who should have more say over what happens with the DEX. I don't see that. I have to reread this again because I was kind of confused like you. I saw what it said, but I was having a hard time understanding what it was meant to actually do. And yeah, it will make Osmo a little harder to sell for sure. And in the bear market, that gets a lot of people's attention. Don't know if it's great long term, but I guess we'll have to see.
They say the goal is to get the liquidity providers to be able to vote, but really it's to get the liquidity providers to stake, to vote. They could have LP tokens get governance power, which is something that other DEXs are playing with.
I think that's the path of least resistance, is to just give assigned utility to the actual LP tokens, which you do get when you supply liquidity on a DEX.
Yeah, and it's not trivial, especially for a layer 1. There's more customization of that in layer 2s, but maybe Kava Mint will help.
Up next, we have a draft proposal on the hub, which suggests that we need a third-party audit for interchain security to make sure that it's actually safe. So I honestly think this is a great initiative. You can never have too many eyes checking something that will affect the security of, the hub, which is the central source of the Cosmos.
I think ICS is make or break for the hub. I think that it's really hard to have a bull case for the Atom token without ICS working perfectly. So as a community member, a lot of the technical details and technical conversations go, over my head, but this is something where I think, like you said, I don't mind being extra cautious because I'm an Atom stakeholder, and ICS needs to be successful. Yeah.
A little bit of insight into what that process kind of looks like. Audits are very, very, very expensive. If you're trying to look out to like Certic or Halborn or something, you could be looking up to $250,000. And for something that's just ICS, it's probably going to be less than that, but you're still looking into the 6 digits. And the efficacy of the audits is also something that needs to really, really be discussed, because most of the audit firms are really focused in solidity. And the actual audit firms that have been doing Cosmos-based audits have not been all great. You need to have people that this is what they do, that they're focused in CosmWasm. It is completely different than a lot of people's expertise. And so the best people qualified for auditing it are Informal Systems, are Notional DAO, are a lot of the ones that are internal and working on this. So it does help to get more eyes on it. I'm just not necessarily sure what the ROI on it would be, especially since a lot of things that have been audited, even in the Cosmos ecosystem, have had issues and exploits post-audit that should have been easily caught by people who are pretty familiar with it. But you guys are absolutely right. There cannot be issues with ICS. We do need it to work perfectly and properly.
I think it has to work perfectly out of the gate. I don't think there could be a hiccup for ICS.
No, there definitely cannot be.
So also inside the Cosmos, since we've got the the man, the myth, the legend, Cosmos Joe here as well right now. Joe, could you tell us a bit about Joe Chain?
Yeah, I'll tell you what I know. I'll tell you what the devs allow me to know. And the main devs are Putmos and Reese from Notional. And as far as I know, the Joe Chain is a live mainnet that's going to act like a test net, almost like Kusama, to Polkadot, where devs will be able to try things out and then migrate functioning contracts and products over to a chain like Juno. And it's not IBC enabled. There are tokens on the chain. There was an airdrop of the Joe token to people who participated in the NFT mint that happened late November, early December, around then. And from what I've been told, this chain has all of the most upgraded versions, all the bells and whistles of the most up-to-date Cosmos chains. And that includes liquid staking. That includes token factory. There will be NFTs. There'll be a DEX. And there'll be multiple tokens that you could trade. We have a strong validator set of 10 right now. Started at 16, and we've trimmed the fat. I think they have to do some upgrades. But you could make the case that less is more. Maybe less is more on a non-IBC enabled chain.
Decentralization really holds back drive and vision and focus. And honestly, I love it. We've seen like Doge have tons of success, and that's like a layer one. There's not a ton of smart contracts built on it, other than other like scam coins. But this is like actually something that's really neat and helpful. Kind of like the Litecoin to Bitcoin, a tested environment in which there's less risk involved, where you can try things on mainnet, because mainnet's always different than testnets. And then if things work out, port them over to things like Juno, Archway, and other layer ones on Cosmos ecosystem. So I think it's brilliant. It's a need, and I love that it's you, man.
It's fun. And I thought it was a joke, and I'll admit the UI is not great, but there is a UI. It's JustJoe.app, and from what I've been told, this will be the most used Cosmos SDK chain, because it's going to be meant as just a playground for devs to be able to test things out on mainnet and then possibly move them over to something like Juno.
Well, I'm gonna have to talk to my team and bump that up to 11 on the validator set.
It's a dev's cup of Joe before actually starting with their day. So very nice. Now for news outside of the Cosmos, we continue seeing the tension between Barry and the Winklevoss twins. So currently there is an investigation, a DOJ investigation about the transfers between the DCG and Genesis. And then on Thursday, the SEC filed a lawsuit against both Genesis and Gemini, claiming that the EARN program represented the sale of unregistered securities. So yeah, things are definitely heating up in that corner of the Web3 space. Any thoughts?
Gemini is one of the only crypto companies that is allowed to operate where I live in New York. I hope they're on the right side of this, because it's one of two exchanges I'm allowed to use, the other one being Coinbase. I was allowed to use Nexo. I don't know if that's still the case. I don't know. I tend to think the Winklevoss twins have more to lose by lying. So I'm hoping Gemini is on the right side of this.
If you're US based, you might not know that New York is the one state with much stricter crypto laws than the other 49.
Yeah.
And they literally have access revoked from a lot of crypto platforms, anything that you take for granted that you use. I had some buddies that I worked with that are based in New York, and one of them could not get through support at Coinbase. And so there was nothing he could do to buy crypto. He was just screwed.
Yeah, there's basically a pay-to-play system here where you need a special crypto license to operate. And like I said, it's Coinbase, Gemini, and I believe they have offices in Manhattan, right? They're, Coinbase is publicly traded. And then the other one was Nexo. But then I heard they were planning to pack up and leave New York anyway, because it was such a hassle dealing with the state and their license and whatever their restrictions are.
Mm.
I mean, Nexo's a whole other ball game this week. They had a police raid last week, and they're suspected of money laundering and tax crimes. So they're not looking too hot either.
It's wild. I follow Otaru on Twitter, so we'll link the tweet thread from I believe last June, where he just calls them the Bulgarian boys. The founders of Nexo are from Bulgaria, and basically claims them of a whole bunch of financial scams and fraud, like including like taking money from supposed charities and whatnot. So I'll link that. I'm not going to attest to whether or not it's true, but it was very interesting reading that 7 months ago, with nothing really negative being said about like Nexo, except for a couple maybe sketchy liquidations that happen on their platforms. But now seeing that they're getting like actually raided by police, it does seem that there might be more going on than initially met the eye, and that maybe this Twitter otter isn't completely crazy.
And then FTX is making headlines again. So Sam released a post-mortem on Substack, claiming his innocence yet again. So there's been a couple things that have been going on there. So the FTX bankruptcy attorney claims that FTX has recovered $5 billion in assets, but people who have been checking on chain seem to disagree with that. So, take that as however you wish to take it. Other than that, Sam's lawyers are saying that they should not have seized any of Sam's assets, seeing as he has not been found guilty just yet.
There are elements of this that you would think were written by like the same script writers that work for the WWE. And then a lot of it's like really straightforward, like, oh, look, someone got greedy in finance. So it's hard to follow this. It really is. And I was not allowed to use FTX, so I wasn't interested in the beginning. And I feel like there's no catching up. It's just going to be never ending.
Yeah, and the reverberations of FTX fallout have been felt all over the sex space. Coinbase and Crypto.com both laid off 20% of their staff. Coinbase had previously already laid off 18% early last year. And then Blockchain.com is now laying off 28% of its staff. But the good news on that front, Binance is increasing its headcount this year by 15 to 30%, according to an announcement they made recently.
Yeah, so centralized exchanges, they make their revenue from the trading fees. And as the price of everything went down, the trade fees, what was 0.2% of a $1,000 trade, is now 0.2% of a $400 trade, which with everything going down 60%. So it makes sense that the layoffs are following. Hopefully, if we hit a bull market and prices start going back up, things will resume. They're able to rehire. My thoughts as to why Binance is increasing is they are expected to and have so far capitalized on the collapse of FTX, getting the customers of theirs that are still trading crypto that are willing to keep going.
Yeah, so that's it for the news this week. Thank you so much, Joe, for joining us, and Eric for hosting.
No problem. I had fun. This was great.
Honored to have you on, Joe. And if you guys are watching this and you're working around the Cosmos ecosystem, please don't hesitate. Reach out. You can find me on Telegram, Twitter, and we'd love to have you on the show and hear more news around your neck of the Cosmos.